Hi, friends, and welcome back to the Wellness Junction podcast. My name is Jordanna, and I am so glad you're here. Starting this month of May, we are doing a new series called the Quarter Life series. In this new series, we will be discussing about how to navigate transitions, and our focus will be transitions that we experience in young adulthood, but we will also just be speaking about transitions in general because let's be real about it. Change, as we say, is the one thing that is constant throughout our life. Our bodies are changing, we change the environments that we live in, with our relationships. They don't stay the same from one season to another. In short, life is just so seasonal. And that means that one very important thing to learn is how to navigate the transitions that we find ourselves in. And so that's what we will be speaking about through this series. In this episode, I am sharing my own personal experience that inspired this series. And I will be telling you a bit about my background, some of the changes that I have navigated in the past, and also some of the things that I am navigating right now, some which I think are kicking my ass a bit, and some which I think I have been able to handle quite. I am so grateful that you have chosen to be here with me for this episode. So let's just get into it.
Welcome to the crossroads where we meet. Young hearts collide, finding steady feet. In the chaos, balancing the climb. Wellness Junction, where we heal in time. Oh, we're talking changes, chasing dreams. Through the highs, the lows, the in-between. Together we rise, let the journey flow. At Wellness Junction, we're here to grow.
When I start speaking about transitions, I could literally sum up my entire past maybe 3 years from 2021. My life for the past about 3.5 years has just felt like one huge transition that is made up of other small transitions in there. I feel like the minute I walked into 2022 and all the change and transition that COVID set us into, it's like my life really just took that as a notice to keep changing every now and then. And some of it has been really difficult to navigate simply because I think I was used to my life looking a certain way. And then one question by one of my colleagues when I was doing my attachment at the beginning of 2021 really just shifted the direction in which I was walking. And it's like I have never been the same. But it is not so much this question from my colleague that changed the way I started thinking about my life, which I will share in a bit. But also, I think that it's a change in perspective that had been looming somewhere in the horizon. It just took that one question for me. It's like that one question was like the spark that sent the whole fire ablaze. So in 2021, I was on the verge of finishing my university degree. And at this point, I was going for my attachment. So this one Friday, I'm seated in the office with one of my colleagues, and he is fixing himself a drink. So he asked me if I wanted him to fix me a drink as well. So I said, I do not drink. Okay, it was alcohol. So it's like, I do not drink. Then he asked me, and this is the question that changed everything. He asked me, well, so if you don't drink, what do you do in your free time? That question, it's such a simple question. It's something that you should be able to answer and then finish and go on your merry way at home at the end of the day and never have to think about it again. But that question really did shift a lot of things for me. Of course, I found an answer to give him then. I can't even remember. It was something to the tune of, I don't know, listen to music, singing, yada, yada. I can't even remember what I answered him. But I remember that question because it led me to ask myself, when do I ever have free time? And in me asking myself this question, it wasn't a matter of when do I ever have free time because I don't have the minutes and hours in my time to spare because I have this busy schedule. It wasn't really about that. It was more a question of autonomy because I felt like that question actually had me ask myself, do I ever feel like I have control? Yeah, maybe control. It had me wondering, do I ever feel like I can choose for myself what to do with my time? Up until that moment, of course, by just the nature of what life looks like, most of the major decisions in my life had been sort of made for me. I mean, when you finish primary school in Kenya, for example, it is the government that places you in a high school. So then from there, you can choose if that's what you want to go to, or if you want to go to a different school. Like some choices in your life are sort of just like made for you in the system that we are operating in. And this is that more specific for like my context. And when you finish your high school, yeah, they give you like, there's this process that they give you to choose the courses that you are interested in. But ultimately, they will place you to a university. And sometimes it's usually to do a degree that you are interested in. It's part of some of the things that you chose. And sometimes it is the farthest thing from what you chose. And I mean, all my Kenyan people, let's gather here and just for a minute speak about how frustrating that can be because that process usually has a lot of frustrations. You can be placed in a university or college that you have probably never even heard of in a course that you never even thought existed. And I remember for me way back when I was placed in Kenya Methodist University to do computer information systems, I was just like, I am going where? To do what? And I think I cried for almost an entire week. Computer information systems was nothing close to what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something like that's closely related to engineering or something like that. And then they placed me to do what course? And then in Kenya Methodist University in Meru, I had never been to like the eastern part of the country. I think Meru is in the eastern part, if I'm not wrong. Like that's just it's not something I had ever envisioned for my life. So even when I'm talking about change and accepting things that are new, that for me was really one huge shocker. But I had gone to the university they had. I mean, after a while, I reconciled with it. I went to that university, I did that degree, and at this point, I was on the verge of finishing. But then, in addition to like the choices of, you know, where you're going to school and what you're doing, I think for me now, personally, in my life, my parents basically just made the most of the thing, like the decisions about, you know, how I was spending my time and where I was spending my time. If I was not at home, so my mom and dad have lived separately because of work for quite some time. So even in my younger years, I spent most of my childhood years living with my grandmother because that was decided for me. And, you know, as you know, like in most homes, the adults in your life just make the choice, and then you are sort of expected as a child to understand and then go on ahead with it. There is usually very little to no communication on the decision that has been made or why it has been made. You just, you know, they just ferry you to where they want you to go, and life goes on. And so this question really did rattle me because it's like with that question, I was facing this dilemma of, do I really have a voice in my own life? And I know my parents, they care for me very deeply. I do know they love me. And I do know that the choices that they have made that have impacted my life greatly, they were made from a place of love and concern. And, sometimes really just from a place of survival, because choices like even me staying with my grandmother, it was not really something that they did because they wanted to. It was a choice that was made out of necessity. Some of the choices are made that way. And I know that that's something that we can relate to, because some of the changes in our lives that really set in motion the transition periods in our lives, they're usually decisions that were made for us with people that sometimes had the very best intentions. And sometimes those changes can really go well. Sometimes they can be things that really affect us so much, whether it's a change that's made in young adulthood or it was made during childhood or even sometimes in adulthood. For example, if your parents decide that their marriage is not working and then they decide to split up, no matter what point in life you are, that decision still affects you in one way or another. Or, when they choose to get married, and sometimes it's not even that things that they choose, it's just things that just because life happens, when we lose loved ones, when we have to move, when we are pursuing better education or better work opportunities, change is all around us. And so I found myself in a position where I kept wondering. I know that sometimes things have to change because of decisions made by other people, but I really would want to start having a voice in decisions that directly relate to me. I wanted, from that point on, I just remember thinking to myself that I would very much want to be given the ability to choose and for me to learn how to make choices in my life. I started having this image in my mind where I felt like I was a spectator to my own life. It's like we are in a cinema hall and the movie about my life is playing, and I am supposed to be the main character in this movie or in this play, but it's like I'm seated somewhere behind in the audience. It's like I'm even struggling to see what's going on in the arena. It's like I wasn't even the center person in my own life. I have always just gone back to the feelings I experienced or the thoughts that were racing through my head that day, because I feel like that time really changed a lot of things. It set me into this transition period where, for me, that was like the coming of age. It was like my coming of age thing. It's like that's when I realized actually I am at the age, because that was 2021. I was 20 at that point. And I just realized that this is actually the time in my life when I decide that I have to make choices for myself on what I want to do and where I want to go. Granted, the voices of the people in my life still very much matter, aka my parents, my family, the people that are around me that care about me. And over time, I started realizing, okay, it is not really a dismissal of their voices or what they think about my life. It is really just now, from now onward, their voice comes to the table, not as the only option, but it is one of the options. And now this for me it was like a really strange place to be at, because up until then, as I have said, my parents pretty much just they told me what to do. And because their approval is something that I have always just deeply craved. I think from feeling like I didn't have it when I was younger, from not growing up with them and really not. I saw them every now and then. My parents weren't totally absent, but they were present every now and then. Sometimes for like long periods of time, especially my mom. My dad was constantly almost away. But my mom stayed around for a while, for like several months at a time. Starting to feel like now I actually have to start making choices for myself. I think that has been one of the biggest changes of my young adulthood. Realizing that my parents' decisions, like what they want for me, no matter how good and how amazing, it's now one of the choices. If what they think and what I want is different, then now I have to weigh them as choices and not really just say, because this is what they say, I have to go on ahead and do it. There, and what this is what they have decided, and this is what I have really to go ahead with it. But then again, this was happening at a point in my life where it, because now this is like a change in my relationship with my parents for sure, but also like a change in my decision making process and how I choose to view my life, like taking back my voice, as it were, and like getting some autonomy for myself. But also, this was also happening while I was going through a change in my career. So stick with me and we'll go on a really short break. And coming up, we will continue to talk more about the transition that was going on in my career life. Okay, so as I had mentioned, this was happening at the time when I was on the verge of finishing my college degree. I had just like a few more requirements that were left for me to finish, graduate, and sort of then as we are made to understand or think, then the next right steps will be finish this degree, get a job, support my family. That was technically how my life was supposed to go. The only problem with that was I hadn't, up to that point, figured out what exactly I wanted to do as far as my career is concerned. My degree was in computer information systems. And up until then, as I have mentioned, this was not really a degree that I had ever thought about. Computing technology, it was never really on my radar. It was not a choice that I was exposed to when I was growing up. When I started doing the course, I decided to take up the course and do it anyways, just to reduce the complexity of having to change courses and that whole process. It will feel like a lot. And so I really wasn't up for changing any of that. So I was just like, you know what, this is not all too bad. I will go and do this course. And so I went in and did the course. What I started realizing over time, I started realizing, oh, actually, this is actually not too bad. It's not far removed from what I wanted to do, not because of, not like the courses per se, but like in principle, like the ideas, because, yeah, I didn't feel like it was too far removed, not in by the course, of course, computer information systems and like an engineering degree are different a bit, but I started finding similarities, especially in the fact that I liked to learn, and if the way I liked to learn, I enjoyed it by and large. But I kept feeling like I need to nail down where exactly in this vast tech field I fit in, like finding my corner in this tech field, because technology is very vast. And especially if you have done the degree that I did, it just felt like it gave us an introduction to quite a few things. And so then from there on, you could decide what you wanted to do for yourself. But for me, I now started having a problem of narrowing it down to one specific thing that I would like to do. My problem was not that I couldn't find something that I was interested in this very vast field to do. My problem was actually that I felt interested in way too many things. So I felt like I'm being pulled in 10 different ways. Like, oh, software engineering or software development, that sounds interesting. Or, network development, this sounds interesting. And then I say, it was like shiny things happening all around me. The minute I think this is it and I try to do it, this other thing pops up and I'm like, oh, that looks nice also. I'm very interested. And I try that. So I ended up attending so many meetups online. I was just all over the place. And at that point, I didn't even feel like there was someone that could help me process what was going on. So a career crisis is happening. And at the same time, now I have this other crisis sort of that has been now put on my plate where I'm just like, wait, if I have had things being decided for me all this while, what does that make me? I really did not feel like I had a voice. But also, in as much as I was conflicted on a few things here and there, I sort of had like an idea. I was like, okay, maybe I'll start with software development. But as you can imagine, even software development has different approaches to it. So it's not even as cut and clear as if you start doing this is like the path that you go down under. 2020, that was All of this started happening at the beginning of 2020 and then all through into 2021. Towards the end, September of 2021 was such a huge, what can I say? It was such a definitive moment in my life because it's like the weight of all the things that I had been trying to process really came down on me. And I had such a huge emotional meltdown in October of 2021. It's like I felt both frozen and paralyzed, but also so torn apart inside. And the fact that I couldn't figure out who could help me to navigate all of this. It felt so confusing. At this point, I had moved back. I did my attachment in Nairobi, and then I had moved back to Meru. For context here, for people who don't stay in the country, Meru and Nairobi are like 5 hours apart. So I went back to Meru, where now my university is, because like, okay, I have finished my attachments on all it. Let me go. I had like a few courses that I needed to take care of. So it's like, okay, I'll go back and try and finish this degree. So in October, I was all the way out there in Meru, but also I was just like, I'll try doing a few things online. I had started like this software development course because I was like, okay, maybe this is somewhere I can start and then I'll see where to go on from there. I was out there in the world all by myself trying to earn a little bit of money because my parents couldn't totally support my staying out here just because of where we were at financially. But, nothing was coming up as far as like the two online jobs that I was applying for, nothing was coming up. So then again, just this whole financial landscape of trying to support myself while I try to finish this degree, while I try to figure out my relationship with myself and my parents, while I try to figure out where I want to go as far as my career is concerned, while I try to also navigate the expectations that now my parents have of me because, when you are in campus, they support you. They supported me no matter how difficult it was, my rent, my food. But now I'm having to take care of all of that by myself because the very minute you finish or you have signs of almost finishing, it's like, yeah, you're now on your own, and now I have to figure out things financially. And also, as far as my relationships were concerned, I felt like the 1.5 years between end of 2019 and now it was almost end of 2021, it's like our lives had moved on. And also just because of how COVID happened, everyone went their own separate way. So even like as far as my relationships, that is like my friendships were concerned, it was just like everything was falling apart all at once. And it all finally just got to be all at once. And it's like I couldn't function from like end of September. My friend had a wedding in I think it was August. Was it August or September? I think it was like towards the end of August of 2021. And I can just remember like that was the last time I felt like I was okay for a really long time. It was like a depressive moment where I felt like I need to figure out so much. And it was all just weighing down so heavily on me. And I did not feel like I could speak about any of it to anyone. So that's just like the moment I was in. So getting out of bed was difficult. There's this period where I literally like just stayed in the house whose rent I was struggling to pay for anyways. There's times when I would just like stay indoors for days on end. I remember I think during that time I almost watched the entire of Criminal Minds. It was the only thing I could get myself to do. I struggled to eat. Like there's a time I was even staying with a friend of mine, and it had been like from when we had dinner, it was like the whole day. It was like during the day, it was like 4 p.m. And then she was like, "Do you know, actually, by the way, you have not eaten today?" And in my mind, it hadn't even registered that I hadn't eaten. Like that's how things had gotten. Me hata sikuwa nafikiria. I wasn't even thinking that I hadn't eaten. It was just like a hazy moment, and just wondering, when is this gonna end? What is it going to take for me to end, for me to get out of this, whatever is going on. So throwing another spanner in the works. At that time, also, my faith is very important to me. So I've always found, not really found myself. Like I always just intentionally have always been part of our faith community, no matter where I am. When I was in campus, I was part of like our Christian fellowship. And so when I had come back, the option, like for me, the only option was, to continue fellowshipping with my Christian fellowship, even though I had been like now out of school for a while. But then I changed churches at that point. So what I remember happening is so this new church that had moved in, they had an internship. And that internship was going to run for the entire of 2022. And I remember my friend floating the idea by me. And at first I was just like, oh, sounds cool. I don't know if there's something I'm interested in. But then I had joined them. And then, during the period that I had joined them, in as much as like I had all of this going on, there are times when, when I could get myself out of bed, go to church, nini, nini. So I had been helping to organize an event that happened that year in December, and I had a really good time. It helped to bring me back to life a bit. So now during the time when I had now like actively rejoined, I had actively now joined the churches. They floated the idea by me as again, and now this time I actually thought about it a bit more seriously. And I was like, okay, this does not sound too bad, considering everything that had been going on with me at this point, where I was just like, even finishing school, in as much as like almost done, even now, like just getting myself together to complete my project, do the few courses that I needed to retake because, missing marks, losing marks, all that conundrum. I couldn't even get myself to finish this. The idea wasn't really conscious, but I made a subconscious decision to put my whole life on hold and just be in this program for 1 year. And then, in the process of that, hopefully, for me to figure out everything that was going on, because as it's like, I'm going to lose my mind. If I continue on the path that I am on, I am going to lose my mind. But as you can imagine, I shared that with my mom, and she was just like, you are doing no such thing. You are finishing your degree, getting a job, and coming out here to help all of us because, child, I mean, they're just like, no, none of that is happening. Because remember, this is happening at a time when I have realized actually I can make some of my life's decision on my own. And if it doesn't align well with them, like what they want me to do or the path they want me to take does not actually have to be what I do. I can decide to do something for myself. So this was actually the first time my mom and I disagreed on something and I insisted on what I wanted to do. Child, let me tell you, I would never have guessed how much this simple decision set in motion in terms of my life and some of the crises that I was facing, in terms of my career, in terms of my relationship with my parents, in terms of my relationship with myself, even at some point in terms of like romantic relationships. My decision to take part in this program, it was called Cultivate. My simple decision to take part in Cultivate, it changed so much so quickly. I thought that things had changed. Things had changed for sure. But what I didn't realize is also my mindset had now changed. And it's like now things would continue to change henceforth. A lot happened. And after this quick short break, we are going to be talking about some of the things that continued to change and just the aftermath of all of that. And we will also talk a bit more about where I am right now and how that has informed this series. So stay tuned, my friend.
Oh, we're talking changes, chasing dreams. Through the highs, the lows, the in-between. Together we rise, let the journey flow. At Wellness Junction, we're here to grow.
Okay. after I made that decision and I shared with my mom, first of all, she was even struggling to grapple with the fact that I had changed churches. I had been Anglican, Protestant, that is. I had, like, my church has always just been Anglican. That is just what we have always done as a family. Coincidentally, both sides of my family are Anglican. My dad's side is Anglican, my mom's side is Anglican. So that's basically what we have always ever known. So, first of all, she was even struggling to grapple with the fact that I was now changing churches. And then now I tell her that I am dropping every single thing. I didn't tell her I was dropping everything, but now I'm telling her that I am not going to be focusing on finishing my degree. Instead, I'm going to be taking a program that she barely even struggled to understand. And then I'm going to be in Meru away for that whole time. She's just like, how are you going to be sustaining yourself? And then I was like, well, there's like a small stipend. She's like, that's my, like, even house helps don't even get paid. They even like house helps get paid more. So she was so against it. And then I floated the same idea by my dad. And then, as you can imagine, the response was just the same. Absolutely not. I was just like, this is a decision that I have already made. At that point, of course, I didn't communicate it that way. This is a decision I have already made and I'm going through with it. So before the program will start, the following year, that is 2022, we had to go for interviews. And I think it is my experience during this interview that really just stamped it in my mind why this was actually a program that I wanted to be part of. Because it is a program in a church. So we had responsibilities that were given that had to do with the church and how it is run, of course. And then we had classes where we had books we were reading. And they had a few people come and talk to us, like guest speakers every now and then during our classes. We had live classes once every week. Was it weekly or fortnightly? I can't remember. But yeah, we had readings. It was a really intense program. One of the things I realized early on is that this was a good program for anyone who was going through transitions in life, because it will sort of help you to back up a bit and get a view of your life, what has happened before, where you are at right now, and where you want to get. So a lot of the things that we were reading, a lot of the talks that we were going through, they were meant to help us process our past experiences, process where we are at right now, but also help us to look forward to where we want to go. And I thought that this was a very timely program for me. And so going back to that experience that I was speaking about during the interview, it's because of the nature of the program. We were asked like quite a few personal questions, not really the kind that you will expect in like a corporate interview if you're going for a job per se. So I remember them asking me about my relationship with my parents. It's something I had never really processed, or it's something I had never really thought about deeply. I just knew that there was a lot of pain as far as my relationship with my parents is concerned. I knew they care for me, I knew they loved me, but it had never really come to my attention how much not growing up with them was painful for me. And the fact that at some point my sisters were living with my parents and I wasn't, and we had never actually talked about it. And I think that's something that is something that even to date, like I still have my days with that whole thing. The fact that decisions were made, and as a child, none of it is explained to you, but you are sort of expected to understand. And it's like you're not allowed. The episode is called For You When It's Hard to Be Away from a Person You Love. It was so hard for me as a child to be away from my mom. But it's not we never had a discussion about it. It was just a decision that was made, and I was expected to understand. At least that's what I thought. That I was expected to understand, never cry about it, never lament about it, always know that it was made in good faith, even though it caused me a lot of emotional pain. That feeling of I am not enough for her to want to stay with me, for her to want to fight for me. Tears called themselves to my eyes. I am a crier. I cry about a lot of things, but man, that one really did break me down a lot. So as you can expect, I found myself crying in an interview. But the fact that a simple question like that helped to bring something to the surface that was way back in my subconscious, but was affecting my life a lot. It was just so indicative for me of how much more about my life have I not thought consciously about and tried to process, and how is it affecting my life? I was also asked a few questions about my childhood, and particularly one like very difficult experience I had as a child. And listen, I cried for almost 30 minutes straight. It was like all the pain that I had experienced as a young Jordanna was now coming to the surface. And then I realized that even my meltdown, in as much as I thought it was like about the experiences that I was now experiencing with this whole crisis of what am I gonna do in my career life? Where am I gonna live? Money, all of these things. Of course, those were contributors, but I think those were they were triggering a lot more pain from a long time ago, over maybe almost 2 decades at this point, that I had never really processed. So I just made the conscious decision to defy my parents. This is not a how to defy your parents 101. Truly, it's not. It's just sometimes the decisions that we have to make or the decisions that we choose to make can differ from what even the people that love us the most think should be the next, like, conscious, the next best decision to make. And it does not mean that you are right and they are wrong, or they are right and you are wrong. It just means that you are thinking differently about something. Because remember, at this point, I wasn't really giving my parents the whole picture of it, because we didn't have a culture of having open and honest conversations with each other. So we were at totally different points in as far as what I wanted out of my life and what they wanted out of my life. So initially, they would just communicate what they wanted, and I would feel obliged to go by it so that I can make them happy. So that I have always just been afraid of upsetting the peace with them, because I want them to love me. I want them to be proud of me. I want them to agree with me. Their approval was what I hinged my entire identity upon. And now I was doing something that they did not approve of, and I felt like I was crumbling inside. Deep down, I knew that this is a decision that I needed to make, but it was tearing me apart so much, because I was now having to go at this without the consent of my parents. And with 1 year, I was just like, damn it, I gotta do this. It's important for me to, but also I just wish they agreed with me. We did not. And I still had to go on with it. So for all of 2021, some of the main things that really did change was my interaction, not just with my parents, but also with my siblings, because, of course, I am the eldest. My mom has 4 girls, and I'm the eldest of them. When the eldest sibling makes a decision in the family, it sort of just has a way of affecting people, especially when you're making a decision that they do not agree with. My younger siblings are inclined to go with what my parents think is the right thing for me, and even what they think is the right thing for me. But for the first time, I was getting to choose myself, knowing that this decision is going to affect them, even though for a time it's going to have an effect on them that is not what we are used to. But then again, it was like me zooming out and saying, this decision is going to affect what my life is going to look like ahead. And if I don't make it now, I knew without a shadow of a doubt, if I don't take this time to process these things that are happening right now, it's gonna come back. It's gonna come back at me at some point. And what if it does when the stakes are much high? It was just me and my degree that I was not finishing. It's just like, what if this happens when, I'm navigating something important in my career? Or if it happens when, I'm a mom, with a husband and 3 kids, or, I have moved to a different part of the world. And so because it just like felt like the time for me to make this decision. So that change in my relationship with my parents and my siblings, it rocked my world. It rocked my world so much. My goodness. It would take that whole program, that whole year, up until the following year. That's when I actually sat my mom down and I told her why I made the decision that I would. And she got a bit of understanding about why it meant so much to me. And I think me telling her about this, brought it sort of brought a bit of resolution and reconciliation between the two of us. So, like that, it makes me glad. At least I'm glad that we got to we at least got in the same book. As we were operating, we weren't even like in the same book or like in the same chapter. At least now we were in the same chapter. So, that was good. As far as my career is concerned, throughout this whole season, one thing I realized was my problem was not navigating a change in my career. It was not a career crisis. It was an identity crisis. And that's why I chose to name this series the Quarter Life Chronicles, because I was actually just reading up a statistic a couple of days ago that said about 3 in 4 people between the ages of 25 and 35 will experience a quarter life crisis. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. And the thing is that this crisis is usually not set in motion by age necessarily. It's usually set in motion by experiences in our lives as they change. And I know that this is something that we experience a lot because for me, things change almost everything at once. I changed that. Even you set yourself in motion. For example, you decided you want to go out of the country for a degree or a master's, a PhD, or whatever. It could be that you chose to get married. It could be that you decided to change jobs or you decided to change a specific part of a career that you are already in. It could be that you decided to go and do a totally different degree from what you had always wanted to do or you thought was what you wanted to do or what was always expected of you to do. I think that when we get to a place where we are defying the norms, it is a change that will always set in motion a transition period in our life. And as a young adults, where a lot of things are changing around us, one simple thing can be made so difficult to move through because when a lot of things are changing, you can feel like your entire world is being pulled apart. So it's like your mind can't even decide which transition to focus on, you know? And maybe just to like something that has helped me with clarity is the difference between change and transition. So apparently, change is event the event that the shift, it's like an event, but transition is the period. It's like the process of us adapting to things changing. So in young adulthood, definitely a lot of things are changing. I mean, from just what I have shared, can you imagine how many changes I have listed? And all of this was happening in a period of like 1 to 2 years. And it's a lot to change in a short period of time. And all of that while we are still expected to show up in jobs, to show up in relationships, whether romantic or platonic, to show up for our hobbies, to show up, I don't know, to show up for our families, to show up in like so many more different ways, which are still new. Being expected to you're now like no longer showing up in your family as especially if you're like an elder sibling like me and you start having financial responsibilities, it can be made so much more difficult when you feel like you are alone and you can't share this experience with anyone, but also when you don't feel like there's someone who understands the experience that you are going through. It has been from the very first time when I started experiencing all these changes in 2020, it has now been, my goodness, 5 years. I have to keep counting to confirm. It has actually been 5 years. And 5 years down the line, I have become more cognizant of the fact that transitions and change is always around us. as I had said, I would share some of the things that are still changing right now. And my faith or how I relate with God is something that has changed so much recently. Guys, I feel annoyed. My response to my relationship with God changing, or my spirituality, my faith, or the dynamics of it all, my response has just been annoyance. I feel so annoyed because how I showed up in my faith community, it was always the constant. Like I could always rely on how I showed up in my faith community. I could always rely on how I thought about God, how I thought about my faith, how I thought about the people that I serve with or people that lead us in terms of spirituality. And a lot of that is changing right now. And for the longest time, I have just been feeling upset about it. Because as we grow up, one of the things that we start to realize is the inconsistencies between what is preached to us and what sometimes life looks like on the ground, number one, but also sometimes just in the consistencies in the character between what our spiritual leaders tell us and what they themselves show up as. In as much as people will always say when you're facing these conundrums is focus on your own faith, focus on your own relationship with God. If you're focused enough on your walk, on your journey, you will not have time to criticize other people's journeys. Sometimes it's just about trust. If you are the one that has been entrusted with leading this aspect of my life, of course, I know I have my own responsibility to my own faith journey, but we operate in a community and there's people that shepherd us, as it were. And there's just like a breach of trust when, first of all, you feel like what is talked, how God is spoken about is a bit too shallow from what you actually, the God that you actually need in real life. It's like the God that I actually need out here in life. He doesn't match with what we with how he is preached or like what we are taught, number one. There is a bit of trust that is broken when the inconsistencies in character of spiritual leaders, but also the system itself and how it is sometimes made to work against even your faith itself. It's a lot. One of the discussions that we will be having is how to navigate changes when your ideas, thoughts about your faith is changing. But yeah, that's just one of the things that I'm grappling with. And as it is right now, part of me feels annoyed, but also part of me reckons that I am growing up. And part of growing for me is not just growing up, but I think about growing wide. And for me, growing wide, it looks like having a more expansive mindset and belief system that is more accommodating of things not being what I always thought that they were. And I think that's what one of the things that it changes as we grow up. It is our mindset also has to evolve with us in order to accommodate new realities in life. And so that is also happening in my faith journey. So slowly by slowly, I am coming to like a bit of reckoning and reconciliation and recalibrating how I will show up as, how I will show up in my faith journey and in my faith community. So yeah, annoyed and reconciling. That's where I am at as far as that is concerned. Y'all, the other thing is my body. This body constantly changing. I'm just going to leave it at that because, well, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And in the age of digital media and social media specifically, there's so much noise about how you need to take care of your body, from your mind to your soul. So many people now can speak into how you think about your body, whether it is your physical body or your mind, your emotions, even your spirit. There's just so many more voices today than a couple of years ago. So I feel like for me, it makes it a bit more complex for me to know what exactly it is that I need to do in order to take the best care of my body. And so I feel like I'm constantly doubting whether I am doing enough to take care of my body. And as my body is constantly changing, I am navigating how to love myself even as my body changes into shapes and forms that are not my favorite, but to know that it is serving me. My body shows up for me every single day, every single minute of my life. And I cannot come from a place of hatred and criticism in order to change it for something better. What I reap is what I will always sow. And that also applies to where I'm coming from when I want to eat healthier, think healthier, that whole feel better, that whole thing. So those are some of the changes that, my goodness, it's just a lot. Going back to the whole idea of identity crisis versus career crisis, I think that's also one of the major changes and major transitions that has really rocked my world because I, from a very young age, I never really did have one particular thing that I knew I wanted to be or that I knew I wanted to do. Although I have no vivid recollection of it, my mom tells me at some point I wanted to be a lecturer. And I remember asking her, that was actually very recently, I think you're 2022 or 2023. I remember asking her what I wanted to be when I was young. And she told me I wanted to be a lecturer. And although I didn't have vivid recollection of that, when she said it, I was just like, that actually does make sense. So where I have gotten with that specifically is my realization of the fact that my problem wasn't really what do I want to do as far as my career is concerned, rather than actually who am I? Who is Jordanna? What things does Jordanna love to do? What things am I attracted to? What things am I good at? When I show up in my life as my best self, like my most confident self, like what am I usually doing? And it took me like all the way back in childhood. And even the thing that made me realize this was the passing on of my grandma. As I have said, I grew up with my grandma for about 18 years in my childhood. During that time, my grandma noticed that I could speak in front of people. From the very moment she noticed, she got me on stages to speak and to share poetry, to sing songs, whatever chance she would get, even if it was just a guest at home, she would ask me to come in and recite a poem. It was like, she was so proud of that. Even like in my village right now, the people that can't recognize me, when I say, Jordanna Nidin, it's like, oh, the one who used to recite poems. Like it's how most people even from back then know me. In the event of her passing on, or like just during that time, she had gotten so sick. When she passed, like just that whole event of me really thinking back on my life, I realized speaking, communication, being on the stage, like actually speaking with people, connecting with people through speech is something that had always just been so dear to me. But I never really thought about it as something that I would pursue as far as a career is concerned. I knew that I would want to write, I knew that I would want to speak, but for me, it always felt like something I would do on the side, like I am this, let's say, software developer, but I also speak, I like encouraging people. And just by the virtue of that, of course, being in this program, I really had to go back in time a lot to think about my experiences. And that is one of the things that really did come out strongly. And actually, I think it came out more when we were doing like a bit of coaching during the Cultivate program. In one of our live classes, our leader had a coach. Her name is Coach Rehab. You will get to hear from Coach Rehab somewhere during this series. Coach Rehab came on and she was supposed to help us, to take us through coaching. It was meant to be a group coaching and it was specifically supposed to be for the ladies. So we would gather and then we did a few sessions with her. But during the sessions, she told me, in as much as these sessions are going to end, if you want to do more work, you can hit me up and we can plan something together. Because she said, she was just like, I sense that you really want to do the work. And so in the process of me working with Coach Rehab, that was much later. But even just these brief sessions that we did have, it got me to think about my past and what my life looked like. Because up until this point, I had so many of the painful memories from my childhood. And it's like that's what I carried with me all through. During one of the sessions, when she asked us to write a letter to your younger self, it was like telling yourself about yourself, what your experiences were like. And I remember writing that letter. It's like one of the things that came out really strongly. And so it was like just made that much more prominent in the event of me thinking about my life with my grandma when she passed on, and just that whole thing, because she passed on in February of 2022, and it was actually just around the time when we did those sessions with Coach Rehab. It was like maybe 2-3 months later when we did those sessions. Going back to find my voice, going back to find myself, going back to find the Jordanna that was buried beneath so many painful experiences. High school is like a period of my life that I can barely remember. It's like I have to go through hypnosis to remember what happened in high school. I was just going through life. I was just moving through it. I didn't have like nothing that set my heart on fire, nothing that really. A few experiences definitely do stand out. And so there's like me and my voice and the things that I love to do that were buried beneath so much that I now went into the work of trying to unearth that Jordanna who was very confident, and she did not care whether what she said was the right thing to say. And yeah, she just showed up as her bubbly self. Yeah, it has been, my goodness, a long 5 years of growing up, growing wide, growing down, setting my roots, trying to find myself, also realizing that my experiences from way back when, in as much as they're very prominent and they feature greatly, of course, in the bigger picture of who I am, but they're not definitive. And if there are things that I want to change, I have the ability to do that. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of showing up and sometimes a lot of annoyance and being angry. But I can actively participate in my own life. I think that for me is what freedom has felt like in adulthood. It's I have the liberty to participate in my own life. I can make decisions, I can fail to make some. Of course, I live with the consequences, but I can actively participate in my life. One of my favorite podcasters, her name is Jess Connolly, and Jess says it's living fully awake. I love that term, living fully awake, because we can go through life just being so asleep to what is happening around us. It's like we're walking through life as, like zombies, just moving from one experience to the next, get a job, get married, have kids, and then maybe wake up and a lot of life has happened and you don't feel like you have meaningfully contributed to it. But my quarter life crisis, which I felt like it will take me out flat. It didn't take me out. Bless. It has awakened me to the fact that I can be the center of that play, that I don't have to be seated in the crowd, whether I'm cheering on or I can be in the center, and I am the table. Essentially, that's what I'm saying. When people are always asking, what are you bringing to the table? I'm like, I am here. The table is already here. And all that needs to be on the table. So, friends, I hope that you have been able to glean a few insights from my experience, and I hope that it has helped you to ask yourself a few more questions about where you are at in life right now. Do you think you're experiencing a quarter life crisis? If you are, I just want to let you know that I am here with you. I am here with you to, first of all, let you know that you're not losing your mind. You're not doing something wrong just because it all feels confusing. You, for showing up and for continue being yourself, you're doing something good for yourself. So I hope you continue to show up and continue to invest in the work of living your life authentically and unfiltered. I am so glad that you get to come along with me on this journey as we talk about our quarter life experiences, whether it is a crisis, the highs, the lows, the in-betweens of it all. I hope you really do stick around. I'll be having conversations with my friends, some new friends, some old friends, like Coach Rehab, just trying to get a sense of it all. As you know, my goal is always solidarity so that you feel less alone while you are going through your own quarter life experiences. I have been Jordanna, your host. I am so glad that you are here with me on this journey. So stay true to you until we meet next time on the Wellness Junction podcast.
Oh, we're talking changes, chasing dreams. Through the highs, the lows, the in-between. Together we rise, let the journey flow. At Wellness Junction, we're here to grow. Mental health for everyone under the sun.